Roush, nice to see you.
Hey, good to see you too.
So you are the CEO of the Aerie Collective, and
that's correct.
Private jet pilot and a magician. So you're how old are you? 28, something like that?
30.
30. Okay. And you have an impressive resume for a 30-year-old. I think you've probably accomplished so far what most people have not done in their lifetime. So I'm very pleased to talk to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's fun.
So what does the Aerie Collective do?
Well, the Aerie Collective was an idea that I had when I was flying private jets in Virginia. I wanted to do more with my aviation background instead of just, sitting behind a cockpit, which, don't get me wrong, that's a lot of fun. Flying jets is it's exhilarating and it's exciting, but I wanted to be the person in the back of the plane rather than the one in the front of the plane. And, because a lot of my clientele were very wealthy real estate people or, tech moguls, and I was super fascinated with what they did. I'm like, man, I want to do something like that. And I kind of fell into the drone space. I had a couple close calls in the aircraft, and drove me in a different direction. And my company, the company I was working for, they had a small side gig doing drones. And my boss was like, hey, if you can fly a jet, you can fly a drone, just, take care of that. Because actually how I got the gig with the flying thing was I rebuilt their whole structure and system for managing the aircraft. And so he wanted me to run his drone company.
Oh.
I'm like, all right, I guess let's see what this is all about. And I jumped, feet first into it, started researching as much as I could, and ran across an article that China had signed a contract with Dubai in 2014 to change their transportation system with drone taxis. And that didn't work out then, but right now, to this day, they're doing tours in Dubai with a company called EHOM with drone taxis.
With drones? Sorry, what?
Taxis.
Taxis.
Yeah. So that
with drone taxis.
Mm-hmm.
You actually hop in a drone?
Yeah. So the idea is it's anywhere from 2 to 5 people, small flying craft that is autonomously operated. It's controlled by artificial intelligence, and there's no pilot on board. So
that's exhilarating and terrifying. I don't know if I want to hop on one quite yet.
Right. And we don't see them everywhere because the time isn't here yet. But that's another thing in the drone space, or in future technology. Anybody who's a part of it is an educator, and I hear that a lot, that people wouldn't trust a drone taxi, and I get that because it does seem a little bit scary, but at the same time, I didn't trust a cell phone that didn't have buttons before one came out, and we're all taught stranger danger until Airbnb and Uber came along and changed our perception of reality. And we still get in airplanes, even though, we don't have to land on the runway. Like, that's not a guarantee. And we're like, all right, I'll risk it. Or we get in a car, and car accidents are one of the highest cause of death. And I don't know what the stats are on that, but it's pretty high.
Yeah.
And every day, millions and millions of us make the decision to hop in a car and risk our life to drive on that icy road or go on that mountain path too fast. And being able to adopt a computer which works so much smarter than a human brain in that one specific area and can do a lot more computations than we can in that one specific area makes it a lot safer than having just a pilot that's flawed or tired or something. So eventually there will be that tipping point where the majority adopts drone taxis and we get a world like the Jetsons.
Incredible. You know, we have this bias towards human beings in terms of like safety. I mean, still, I think a lot of people don't trust Tesla cars.
Right.
I think I've worked a little bit with AI like myself, and it's just so difficult to calibrate. And I just keep thinking like, oh, if the math is wrong on one of these things, but then I think realistically, there's probably going to be some sort of, if the program shuts down, then land the drone sort of
right.
command in there. So we'll probably be fine. But I remember someone,
which we have those anyway right now as it is. We have fail safes, a lot of them that work really well. You know, just within the past couple of years, we've honed that technology down to a pretty precise metric.
The first one you want to get down, I would say. But like humans aren't, I don't know how much we put a lot of faith in humans too. I remember someone telling me about the story of, I think it was these two Korean pilots. So there's always a pilot and a co-pilot, and airports take like crazy measures to make sure that they're both going to be able to fly the plane. So they'll like give them different food prepared completely separately, and so they won't get food poisoning or something together. And but there's this one story of these Korean pilots. So the pilot always, especially in Korean culture, has like a lot of authority over the co-pilot. And so the pilot is like flying I think he's flying very low, or he's kind of about to crash. And then the plane obviously crashed, but afterwards, I think they were listening to the black box, and the co-pilot was like, you might observe that we are at low altitude. Like, he's trying to be super respectful to the pilot, because in his culture, it's all about respect. And so he's like, looking at the altimeter would be a great idea right now. Like, he's just trying so hard to be respectful. And so after that, I think they had to put in place a precedent that made sure that people were able to talk to authority figures sternly in a time of duress, I guess. But I mean, very fallible people.
Well, and for about a decade, Korean Airlines was one of the worst airlines in history. The whole Asian outlook on life is about honor and respect and authority and following authority, whereas America's kind of the opposite, in the sense of our individual rights. Like, we do what we have to do to get the job done, and sometimes that requires, speaking out against people who are wrong, and even if they're in authority. But that's still a recent concept. Because that whole hierarchy, pilot's always right idea, we even had that for a while, but in Asian cultures, it's a lot worse. And so people would. Sorry.
Oh, people would. Sorry.
Like co-pilots or entire crews of aircraft would be silent and watch the aircraft crash, rather than speak up, which terrifies me that was acceptable, which obviously it wasn't, and it changed. But they say in aviation that every rule is written in blood, because they had to lose an aircraft, or a whole bunch of people had to lose their lives for them to realize there was even an issue.
It's incredible to me that there are so many social events or cultural events that, and just anything that can make someone override their basic biology. Like, I mean, that culture is so strong that it will override your need to live. It's incredible. It's amazing how like something can go against 5 billion years of evolution. It's astounding to me. But I think we kind of worship the divine individual in some way. Like, if we look at, we do, and somehow the individual takes precedent over society in a lot of ways. And I think it's good. I think that's the sort of culture that comes up with these billionaire tech guys, because I mean, I don't think you don't see a lot of, I mean, as great as the Scandinavian countries are, they're fantastic in so many ways, but I don't see a lot of like billionaire renegade founders coming out of those cultures because it's so heavily focused on like doing the best for society. So like you become a doctor or a teacher, and entrepreneurs I don't think are worshipped in quite the same way. But even in, I'm sure you remember Bo Bagdal, that he was that his name? He was the military guy.
Oh, Bergdahl?
Sorry?
Bergdahl?
Bergdahl, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so he was I think, do you remember where he was he a Marine or an Army?
He's in the Army.
In the Army. Yeah. He wandered, he had like a mental breakdown of some sort. He wandered off into the desert and got kidnapped by ISIS or Al Qaeda. I'm obviously not quite sure the details, but we spent years and like millions of dollars looking for this guy. And it's incredible how society in this culture, this society spent so many resources, more than you would think would be allocated for a human life, to save this one individual. And people got injured. It was, yeah.
And that's what that whole movie Private Ryan was about.
Mm.
You remember that one? You know, they went into I guess this was World War II, and they had this precedent where if you're the last surviving member of your family, you went back home so that you don't, you know, cut off your line. And there's this guy, I think he had like 3 brothers, and they all died in the war. He was on the front line, so they sent in an entire team to go get him out. And the whole movie was about the ethics of, you know, how much do you expend on one person? Is it worth getting one person at that cost? Because a lot of people lost their lives to do that. And that was something that we explored in the Marines a lot as well, because one of our mantras is you never leave a Marine behind. So whatever, you know, even if you have that weakest link in your team, you know, if he's the weakest link, then that's on you for not getting him up to where he needs to be, because you're not leaving him behind no matter what. And that mindset helps teams fight on harder than they would otherwise, because they know they're not going to be, you know, dropped. But yeah, that's, we could take a whole podcast on its own.
I've heard the Marines have the most, I guess they're the most clustered in the center in terms of like fitness and stuff. Like there aren't a lot of extremes on the low end with Marines.
Right.
Like very cohesive units, I guess.
We're very obsessed with fitness and the gym.
More people should be. What did you do in the Marines?
I was a meteorological and oceanographic analyst forecaster.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah, it's fun. Still hate the word meteorology because there's like 1,000 E's and 20 O's, and I still write it wrong. But yeah, as a meteorologist and oceanographer.
Okay, meteorologist and oceanographer. And what did that job entail?
Mostly ignoring what I was taught in school and learning a lot of stuff on the fly. I went to school at Keystone Air Force Base in Mississippi, and learned all this stuff. And one of the things that they told me was, you're never going to do tropical weather. My first duty station was Okinawa, Japan, which is all they have is tropical weather. You know, tropical island, and you know, all they have is typhoons. They have a dry season and a wet season. And so as soon as I got out there, they're like, yeah, forget everything that you're taught. I started learning about typhoons, and got them the end of 2010. So as soon as I kind of started getting my bearing, that's when the earthquake hit in mainland Japan. I think it was a 9.6. It was one of the biggest earthquakes in history. And it actually killed a guy in California. There was a surfer in California who drowned or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was so big it went all the way across to California. Created a tsunami and knocked down concrete buildings like they're made out of twigs. And then shortly thereafter, the Fukushima nuclear reactors went off. So that was really interesting to be a part of, because I feel like we've grown up with so many different natural disasters, or school shootings or something like that, and we kind of get this desensitized to it after 9/11, because 9/11 was a big deal. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing when that hit, and then it seemed like there were so many things in between there that was like, okay, well, that sucks, that's that's horrible, but that's not right here at home. So watching that hit on TV, my first reaction was, oh, that sucks, just like you do with it whenever you see something on TV. And then the shock of realizing that's actually here. And we were mobilized that day to go help clean up after the earthquake.
Oh.
So most of my time in Japan was humanitarian aid of some sort, rather than meteorology. But
not what you typically associate with the military, but that's what put there to do.
Yeah, I mean, the American military is one of the, from what I've seen, we built bridges in the Philippines after tsunamis took out a massive bridge in Manila. It seems like it happens every year, some sort. We went up to, when Kim Jong-un was doing his power play, we went up to South Korea and bolstered their forces. And then, again, with with the earthquake and Fukushima reactors, we were the first ones on scene. Like, they mobilized everybody, and from what I've seen, it's one of the most powerful helping forces in the world, the American military.
Yeah, we don't talk about that aspect of it very much.
Sorry?
We don't talk about that aspect of it very much. It gets overshadowed by the war, obviously, by the violence and killing, but it's very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It's interesting. What made you join the Marines in the first place?
My granddad. He was a Marine Corps fighter pilot during World War II. Flew with John Glenn, Charles Lindbergh. Did 52 bombing missions in Japan in the Corsair, which is that gull-winged aircraft. You've probably seen it, but it's got like the wings that go like that.
Wow. No, I don't recognize it, unfortunately.
Okay, it's pretty cool, but you can.
I'm interested in World War II history, but like all the machines just go straight over my head. Like, I don't remember anything about them.
Well, this was an interesting aircraft for a couple of reasons. One, it had 18 cylinders in its engine, so like your car is either 4 or 6, unless you have like a V8, which is super nice, but unless you're like a millionaire, you're not going to get anything above 8, because they're expensive and you don't need them. But this thing had 18. It could take an entire clip from an enemy aircraft and just return home like nothing happened. And the other thing that was cool about it.
Wait, what do the cylinders have to do with being able to take a clip from an aircraft?
There were so many of them that you could take out like half of it and it would still run perfectly fine.
Oh, okay.
So it's like you're losing, every time you lose a cylinder, you're losing part of your engine, but it had so many, it could keep going.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how many it had to lose to actually get shot down, but it could take a whopping. The other thing that was cool about it was the Japanese Zero was the fastest and most maneuverable aircraft at the time, and impossible for us to beat. So the the federal government put out a request for aircraft designs that could beat the Zero. And Chance Thought, the company that made it, had this theoretical idea for the aircraft. And they're like, we have this theory that this might work. And the government's like, we don't care, make it. And they're so desperate that the first ones that they put out all of the ones that they put out, they sent straight into the war. They didn't test fly them. They test flew them in the war.
Wow.
A theoretical aircraft that was tested on the battlefield. Right? What?
The pilots, so brave. Oh my God.
Yeah. And they only had one cockpit. Like there were not two seats, just one. So you have one of the experienced pilots, you get in, you try to figure it out. You hope you don't die because its torque was so great that they flipped on the runway a lot. They lost more people flipping the aircraft on the runway than they did flying them in the war. So you have one pilot get in, go figure it out, and then train another pilot who has to, he's like, okay, so this is what I did. Go try to do that.
Don't accelerate.
Now you know, you get, it took me, I don't know, it took me a year to get my private pilot's license, and I was with an instructor for like, I don't know, he's in the cockpit for 3 weeks or something until I did my first solo. And it's like this long, drawn out, precise process.
I'm in the simulator a bunch of times, like, yeah.
Yeah, all the time. You got simulators, you got chair flying, which is where you do it like from your memory and you're in a seat, just pretending. None of that. It's like, yeah, go figure it out.
Chair flying, that's interesting. I didn't know people did that. I do that with guitar sometimes. Like if I don't have a guitar on me, I'll practice something and it works.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
I would do that a lot.
Incredible.
So that's my granddad.
Yeah. Wow. You come from a great lineage. Is there a lot of
he's my hero.
in your family as well?
No. Well, I mean, I think entrepreneur is a state of mind in some way more than it is just a profession. And in that sense, I think my granddad was, because to think about like how he got involved with everything they did, because he also helped write the UCMJ, or the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which governs the military today. He was a lawyer, and he was drafted into World War II. And rather than say, oh, I'll just, I'm drafted, whatever, he wanted to be a pilot. And so he didn't take the draft he took it as an opportunity. And he decided how he was going into the military. And he was too short to actually fly. So the Navy rejected him a couple times, but he ended up strapping some tires to his ankles overnight and to try to stretch himself out because he needed an extra inch. So they eventually accepted him, and rather than go to flight training because he's in Hawaii, and then the Navy wanted to send him to flight training, he joined the Marines so he could go to war and fly the Corsairs, and that's how he flew with John Glenn and Charles Lindbergh. And I know some people don't know who they are, but John Glenn was the first to orbit the Earth, and Charles Lindbergh was the first to fly across the Atlantic solo. So they're national heroes. But they all flew together, and in that sense, he was an entrepreneur because he charted his own path, especially in a time where you can't really chart your own path. And that's it's a draft. You're going, and you shut up and take it. But he's like, no, I'm going to do it my way.
You take advantage of what you're given.
Yeah.
Together any opportunity you can find making your own. That is entrepreneurship in itself.
Right.
Wow.
And that's why I decided to hop into drones instead of flying, because I wanted to be like my granddad. I wanted to be a Marine Corps fighter pilot. And then I got older, because that's my kid dream, my 14-year-old dream. And I grew up and realized it's the wrong era, it's the wrong, everything. His life wasn't my life. And drones seem to be that next step in the evolution of aviation. Drone taxis, swarm drones. Eventually the pilot is going to be removed, but aviation is going to evolve in a different way.
So what is
and,
go on.
So I wanted to, just like he went into the draft to fly airplanes, I saw this path as the same extension of that.
How is the Aerie Collective paving the way for aviation in the future? What are you guys up to right now?
We're making swarm drones.
What are swarm drones? Sounds terrifying.
Yeah. The idea is that you have a couple different roadblocks that we have to solve before we have flying taxis. Safety, regulation, and safety and communication, I think, are the two big ones that can change regulation. Safety comes from security, I think, in the fact that we have the technology, we have the redundancy, but it has to be basically unhackable. You also have to have millions of aircraft talking with each other, communicating with each other so they don't run into each other. And that's a huge task. So what we're doing is we're starting small, and we're attacking the problem of communication and security, and communication through a swarming technology. So swarm is like you have multiple drones. You have anywhere from the light shows have like a couple hundred, and each individual drone works as a unit, and what it does is it talks to all the drones around it. All it needs to know is what the drones around it are doing, so that it can do what it needs to do. It doesn't need to know the whole picture. It just needs to know what the drone in front, behind, to the right and left, and up and down are doing. And then it can respond according to them. And that's how formation flying works as well. There's a lead pilot, and then everybody behind them, they're not looking at where they're going. They're looking at the wing of the guy right in front of them to make sure that they hold that inch distance away from that wing, or a foot, or however much room that they have, which is like super small. But if they're trying to look at where they were going, they'd run into each other. So they rely on the lead. And that's the idea behind the swarming, is you have a communication system where the drones are constantly pinging back to the source, which right now we're working on a blockchain basis for the transfer of information. So they're pinging their location, they're pinging the location of the aircraft in front of them and the location of the aircraft behind them. And the aircraft here is doing the same thing. So you're getting multiple pings on each aircraft from multiple aircraft, telling the system where all those aircraft are. And using a blockchain system that uses either, probably proof of stake to determine where the aircraft are, and using miners to verify that information, to be extremely difficult to hack that system. Well, for instance, like the Bitcoin blockchain would require 51% computing power over the computing power that is already determining or verifying the blocks right now. And 51% computing power to beat those verifying computers is an astronomical amount of power. It would also take a ton of money. So while there's nothing that's unhackable, you can make it very, very difficult and remove the incentive to do so. So that's the idea behind using blockchain as a security protocol.
As far as I understand, a 51% attack in very simple terms, because that's all I really understand, is like blockchain. Every computer will verify that the blockchain is correct, and if a computer gives a different version of the blockchain, then they'll all come to a consensus. They'll all kind of vote and be like, "This is what I see," and then they'll override the computer that's wrong. And so you need 51% of computers but actually I've been told by someone it's slightly less for some reason. I have no idea why. You need 51% of all computers using that blockchain, so who own Bitcoin, to override the consensus and give someone all the Bitcoin. So you would need to hack into like 51% of all computers who own Bitcoin, which is millions and millions of people at this point. It's almost impossible.
If you could convince that many people to go against it, that would take a lot of time and money to convince people, or create a system that was bigger than that to break that system, which it's so, there's no point. Like, why would anybody waste all that time and money to bankrupt a system that they wouldn't even get anything out of by doing it?
You heard of IOTA by any chance? I
don't know.
I don't know very much about it. It's an Internet of Things blockchain system. So it's not actually blockchain. It's something similar, but it's machines transfer information to each other at incredibly rapid paces, so like thousands of times a second. And IOTA works on, it's a different version of, it's not a blockchain, but it's very similar, I guess. And it works in the internet. So anyway.
Okay. Well, so I use blockchain as the simple terms, but what we're doing is not really blockchain. It's called an acyclic graph. And it works a lot faster. It's 1,400 records per second. And it only requires a third of consensus. So it's a lot quicker. It's a lot simpler. It takes a lot less computing power, but I think it does a lot better job for what it does. I think it's better for the amount of scale that we're trying to pull off with the drone taxi system, because we're looking at this in millions.
Does that mean you would sell a coin to people, and so the consensus could be spread all over, or have people mine in a coin for your company?
We could do a coin. I'm currently opting against going after coin because it changes the focus of the technology. And one of the guys that I'm working with, he actually did this a couple of years ago with a partner. And once they made the coin, it became about the coin. It became about the money and the financial aspect and how much they can make. And what we're going after is changing an entire system of how we, control aircraft. And it would be really easy to lose focus because it's a hard thing to fix. It's a hard thing to change.
Wise decision. It sounds like a good decision.
Yeah, so maybe one day, but right now we're just trying to figure out the communication aspect and the security protocol for the swarm itself.
I mean, you know an incredible amount about this technology in your field. I wonder what is your day-to-day sort of work look like as the CEO?
Most of it is finding people that have the vision that we have, or being able to fund the vision that we have, and a lot of pitching. I've been pitching for several months now, and just getting better and better at trying to explain what we're trying to do. And it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. That's basically my role, is putting this massive jigsaw puzzle together. I have the picture on the box. I have all the pieces, and if I don't have specific pieces that I need, it really stunts the growth of of what we're trying to do. And for instance, our specific one right now is software engineers. Software engineers are a weird breed, because engineers in general are very specific. You give them a task, they do the task, they do it. Like, just tell me what to do. A plus B equals C. Whereas I'm a visionary. My whole thing is trying to get what's in here on paper and then in real life. And we have a hardware engineer who gets both sides of that, has the vision and has the engineering prowess to make that a reality. But the software engineers we've met so far are PhDs, engineering types, who it's hard to get them on board with with a young startup that doesn't have a lot of money.
And
so it's
there
chicken
are
and egg.
there are a few software engineers that I met who have that vision. I can think of 2 right now out of everyone I know, and they're both very much set on their own path. Like you can't get them to do any other
Yes.
side projects. They have their thing and they're just a pig in mud. Like they're super into it. And so I
Right.
think attracting that top 1%. Oh, I'm in a farm, and so that's the alarm to say someone's come over. Anyway, it's whatever.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, we're shearing alpacas this week.
Well, I'm at a brewery, so.
Wonderful. Yeah, so just attracting that top 1% or whatever of software engineers, or maybe not top 1%, but those few who understand the complete picture is very that's its own task.
Yes, it is.
Are you pitching to investors as well?
Yes.
Okay.
We realized that the quickest way we can pull this off is by getting funding to be able to develop it out, pay somebody to do what we need done, rather than trying to find that needle in a haystack that 1 gets the vision and 2 has the ability to make that vision happen. It's easier to just have the vision, have somebody make it, build a proof of concept, and then use that to leverage more talent. And we're in the Silicon Valley, so everybody's going to Facebook and Google, and so you're like trying to find that window of people who know what they're doing, but they're not good enough yet to be snatched up by Google.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not even good enough, just well, either a little different that Google isn't exactly or maybe they have a dream, a vision of doing something that's not just being part of a giant tech conglomerate. I mean, I know quite a few people, geniuses in finance, and it's almost too bad because they're these like hardcore mathematicians and they're just essentially transferring money from one place to another. And I personally dabble in finance. Like I like to invest, but it is I think it is a bit sad to see people just moving numbers around when they could be working on like the big new project, big technology. There's pitching is huge. That's the art of pitching might be one of the most valuable skills you can have as a CEO.
I think so, yeah, because my job ultimately is to lead the company. It's not to know anything about drones. It's not to make drones. It's not to really understand drones. It's to be able to pitch a vision and get people to buy into that vision. That is my entire job description. Whether it's people who are working for me or people who are funding me or myself when I get down in the dumps because of whatever shortcoming. My entire job description is pitching.
So what do you guys do right now? Like, what is your company's bread and butter at the moment?
Commercial drone services. We've been doing that for about 3 years now. Back in 2018, one of the biggest and deadliest fires in American history was the Camp Fire, which killed 84 people. It cost a certain utility company, which I don't know if I'm allowed to name or not, but we all know who it is, $2.1 billion in fines. And so they had to inspect all 700,000 of their structures before the next fire season, which starts in May. This is in December of 2018. So I was out there from January to September of 2019. And the project officially ended in August of 2019. We inspected over 700,000 structures, a third of which had never been inspected since the mid-1800s. And some of the stuff we found is a little sketch. So you have these ideas of what you think a modern company should be like, and this was still back in the 1800s as far as their maintenance and repair protocols. So the fire prevention program of 2019 was the largest commercial drone operation in history. Nobody had attempted to scale an operation like this one before. We had over 1,000 pilots. We inspected over a third of California in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
huge.
it was huge. I had 50 teams that I built the teams. I set up all the drones and did all the logistics with the trucks and fixed all the drones that came back when they're broken. And then I flew the hard ones that people couldn't get to, because I ran their operations and logistics for that project. And after that, I went to San Diego Gas and Electric. Oops, name drop. I went to another utility where I did distribution inspections, and then so I did all three of the big ones in California, LA, San Diego, Sacramento, for fire prevention, and then I started flying cell towers with some of the largest communication companies, and since that time, since 2018, there have been 3 more wildfires in California that have been devastating. And so what we're doing is not working, right? It's better than what they were doing before, but it's not working. It's not stopping the wildfires. People are still dying. And that is where the idea for swarming technology came from, because I see how things are done. I was a part of how they were done. And there were a lot of issues with, let's just take data for example, 2.1 million files of data were transferred from pilots in the field to engineers at headquarters. The pilots had to drop them off to middlemen like myself to be given to data handlers, to then be given to data handlers for the utility. But I couldn't give them to the data handlers for the utility. They had to be given to their supervisor. And there were multiple times when I'd be sent up to headquarters to drop off data, and nobody knew I was coming. They didn't know why I was there, and they didn't know who to give it to. I'm like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this way? And of course, they didn't listen to me, because why? When headquarters was on the East Coast in North Carolina, and I'm running operations in California, and they didn't listen to me. Like, it doesn't make sense that you wouldn't listen to the guy who's boots on the ground, who's managing all the operations and logistics. But that's not for me to say. What I can say is we can do it better.
Good, perfect. I think people who know logistics are probably are an incredibly valuable asset in this day and age, because we have so many large scale corporations and they're just bloated. Like, I know people who work in government who literally, they're just like, oh yeah, I work 25% of my day and then I just have no other work to do. And like, there's just so much inefficiency when you have a large scale structure. I think I read one time that every time you double the size of a company, oftentimes it consumes 25% more resources. So just because you can't just, if you're one guy and you're managing 5 people, you can manage them pretty effectively. If you are suddenly now managing 5,000 people, it's like, well, things get lost in the weeds, like money kind of gets wasted. And so if you understand logistics, if you can organize things top to bottom, it's probably what I would be much more comfortable paying taxes if the government was handling its money efficiently. Let's
well, motivation's a big, how do you motivate people to do their job? Well, you don't give them a lifelong pension. And with union strength, it's almost impossible to fire anybody. So, they can be rude and lazy, and the way that budgets are set up, it's like, all right, well, I have to spend my entire budget this year. Oh, I have $12,000 left over. What do I do? Well, if you're certain units in the military, you buy 12,000 TV wall mounts. What are you supposed to do with 12,000 TV wall mounts? Oh, we had to spend our budget. Like, oh, come on. Like, buy drones or something. I don't know, something useful.
As a CEO, how do you make sure that your company manages its money efficiently, even as it scales?
I think that really comes down to priority. And my priority is what makes the most for the amount of work that we're doing. What is even worth our time? And there's some things that are important, but they're not a priority. And my website, for instance, was a big sticking point for that. And when my website became a priority because we're gaining more influence, that's when I started putting money at it. I also didn't buy any drones until I got a contract that required me to have that drone. So I let the contract pay for it. And trying to thinking with this mindset, how can I get everything that I do has to pay for something somehow, or how can I get the contract to pay for whatever it is I'm doing? Like my housing needs to be paid for, my drone needs to be paid for, my vehicle needs to be paid for. Like if I get all of the basics paid for by this contract, then that allows me to focus on what's really important. And demanding that level of value from a customer made it real easy for me to turn down gigs that didn't, the jobs that didn't supply those basics. So we call that in the aviation sector, we call that your minimums, or your flight minimums. Like what is the lowest that you're going to go to succeed? Like, you know, what are the maximum amount of wins that you can fly in? And that just comes from practice. But those minimums really saved me a lot in wasting my money and my time on bad contracts or bad employees, or, you know.
No, opportunity really can be a trap sometimes, especially for people who have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's opportunity just handed to you left, right, and center, and you need to figure out which. I mean, you can only really go for so many opportunities, and so if you're kind of, even if they're good, like even if they're not just, even if it's not just a bad contract, even if it's like just diverting your attention away from the goal, the plan, the path, then that's not what you need to be doing, you know. So it's just, it seems like you have a very direct and centered approach to like, this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm going, and if it fits into that, then good, and if it doesn't, then I need to kind of cut it out.
Exactly. And there's so many times when I'd have a nice cushy 6-figure job handed to me on a silver platter, and I'm like, no, I want to go down this path that is extremely difficult, and I'm going to be broke, and then I'm going to get money, and then I'm going to be broke again, and every time I'm broke, I'm going to look back on this job that I gave up, like, why didn't I take this? And I'm like, no, you can't think like that. You have a purpose. It's not about money. You won't be broke forever. You'll figure this out. Like, but I can do better than this. And it's this cycle that I think I've gotten over now, but
Mindset is so important. It might be the differentiating factor between people who are entrepreneurs and people who aren't. What is your take on mindset? Do you think about it a lot?
It's everything. If my mindset isn't in the right place, then my team's mindset isn't in the right place, and we're fractured. And I've noticed that the people around me, they feed off of my energy. So whatever I'm feeling is what they're feeling, or they're going to respond to me because I'm the leader. The Wi-Fi just kicked in or something. So affirmations, and then making sure that I'm constantly going for my purpose and knowing what my purpose is and why, which is right now swarm technology. Why am I doing this? Why not anybody else? What makes me different? What makes me the right one to do this job? And then reaffirming those thoughts and constantly asking myself that question and getting a more solid answer every time I ask that question really helps me stay on point. Why am I the perfect one for this job? Because I've been doing this for 3 years. Why am I the perfect one for this job? Because I was in I was flying private jets before. I was in meteorology before I was flying private jets. I've been in aviation for over a decade. I know all these different factors of aviation. I know these different factors of technology. I have this mindset that allows me to solve problems and look at things like puzzles and enjoy the process. So I'm here, and also being a Marine, it allows me to get things done, you know, effectively and efficient. So why not be the right one for this job?
This quote I heard, I watched this, the Navy SEALs documentary, that Buds Class 234, I think it was. And it was, if you've never seen it, it's incredible. Like, they go through this Navy SEALs training, and it's just hell on earth. And it's survival of the fittest. Some of them have broken legs by the end of it. It's crazy. And there's this one thing that someone said. He said, give yourself any excuse to win. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. It's like, you could be like, oh, I only have 3 years of experience or whatever. But instead you're like, oh, I'm going to win because of this, this, and this. And everyone has an excuse to win. And it's just a matter of how you look at your life and what you take out of it.
Oh, I have millions of excuses not to succeed. I can think of a million reasons, but you know, so could anybody who's ever done anything.
Yeah.
Could have talked themselves out of anything. So it's kind of like looking through this tunnel, and you're constantly trying to stay in that tunnel, because you know where the light is or where the solution is, and you keep getting blocked by stuff, but you're trying to stay in that line of sight with that goal and get all of the blockages out of the way, because if you look at them, then you'll get thrown off path in so many different ways.
Do you have some sort of productivity routine?
Yes, as far as like my daily routine of how I get things done.
Yeah. How do you stay productive?
Especially with traveling. So I've been traveling for 2 years now. I've been in hotels or staying at friends' houses. After COVID, I was in 17 different states in 6 months. 5 offices, one in Michigan, one in Oregon, one in San Mateo, one in North Carolina, and one in Virginia. And the lack of stability makes it very difficult to get anything done, but at the same time, it makes me very good at my system. And my system is, when I wake up, so I call them end caps. I have my morning and my evening routine, and whatever happens between the morning and evening routine, it doesn't matter, because if I go to bed and I have my morning routine, which is I get up, I drink a glass of water, I go for a run, I come back, I eat something, and I read, write, and meditate. So I do those 3 things when I get back. When I go to bed that night, I look forward to having that glass of water and going for the run, because I get my, you know, constant, stable routine. Whatever happens after that, whether like I get $1 million or I lose $1 million, that is for after my morning routine to deal with. And after my morning routine, I have the energy to deal with whatever comes my way. So if it's a bad day, when I do my nightcap, which is reading, writing in my journal, it resets me for that morning routine. So those 2 things, they anchor my entire day. And when I don't do my morning routine or my night routine, then whatever happens during the day bleeds over into the next day.
Wow. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Of course.
So that allows me to stay grounded regardless of what happens. And there's so many things like losing a contract or getting funded or something that take you up to like really high highs or really low lows. And it's this whole balance of trying to, whatever's going on here, you're just trying to stay in the middle and not be emotionally affected by anything that happens, whether it's good or bad, whether it's praise or ridicule. And those two things, the end caps, the morning and night routine, they keep me healthy, they keep me physically fit, they keep me mentally fit, and they keep me from focusing on the things that I shouldn't focus on.
Is there anything in particular you write when you're writing?
Usually it's my journal, but I try not to do this because sometimes when I'm in the writing process, I get inspiration, and then I'll end up writing for a long time, and then mess up my sleep cycle or something. And I'm like, it's like I have this idea for a poem, and then once I have an idea for a poem, it just gets derailed, because once you're in that mode of rhyming, it's hard to get out of it. It's like, I need to write another one. So usually my journal about poems. I've also got 7 books that I'm working on.
7 books, only 7.
Yeah, I've published one of them back in 2019.
Wow, what's it called?
Regret Nothing.
What's it about?
It's about when I was 14. So my early childhood or late childhood was pretty rough. And I had 2 different examples for how I wanted to live my life demonstrated for me. One was my granddad's, and then one was my dad's. And my dad was a dishwasher at Red Lobster for 10 years compared to my granddad, you know. And it forced me to look at my life from, you know, my granddad is 98, and he's got all of these things that his life is filled with, that I'm looking at, what do I want my life to be filled with? I'm looking at the end of my life. Like when I'm in my dad's or my granddad's position, what do I want to see when I look back on my life? And I would put things in my life, and if I didn't like that thing that was in my life, I wouldn't do it. Or if that thing that I put into my life wasn't, if I would regret not doing it, then I would have to do it. And for instance, if I didn't become a Marine, I would regret that. If I didn't become a pilot, I would regret that. If I didn't go to Japan, I would regret that. And so I made those my goals. It's like, all right, well, I have to be a Marine, I have to be a pilot, I have to go to Japan. Those were my goals that I wanted to achieve before I was 30. I also want to be a millionaire by the time I was 30, but that's a little harder to pull off. It's also not a good goal. So I learned more about goal setting later on, but because of that, I was able to stay on track with the direction that I wanted to take my life in, and I achieved 3 of the 4 goals I set out to before I was 25.
Wow. Hey, and by the way, potential investors here, Peter Thiel, in his book 0 to 1, says that.
Love that book.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books, actually. But he says that a CEO who, even if he's making millions of dollars in his company, if he's paying himself out more than $100,000 a year in the first few years, he doesn't invest, because they should be putting all the money back into their company. So just because you aren't a millionaire doesn't mean you aren't doing the right thing. Doesn't mean you aren't on the right path.
Right.
In fact, it's probably an indication that you are on the right path.
I agree. I think the reason I'm not a millionaire isn't because I couldn't be a millionaire, but I think achieving those other goals and realizing I could do more, I could do better and better and better, made me look at that goal in a different light, because it's not about being a millionaire. What am I supposed to do with $1 million? It's about having purpose and developing something that actually makes a difference. And I'm trying to stay away from getting to the point where I'm like, it's all about the money. It's not about the money. The money will come when the time is right, and I'm not ready for that, or I'd have it, because it's for a purpose. It's not just to have.
I know millionaires who have lives that I wouldn't want. I mean, just it definitely doesn't. It helps with stress and day-to-day things, but it's
right.
I think it's unfortunately only once you become a millionaire can you realize that money isn't everything. That seems to be the way things go for the most part.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett said, go on.
Well, I know I'll get there at some point, but I think once I do get there, I'll blow it out of the water. Like,
yeah,
like once I hit 1 million, I'll hit like 10 million or something, and I won't even recognize it or notice it because it'll be on paper, or it'll be like, now I have other problems to deal with the growth of my company, like you were saying, like, oh, now I've lost 25% efficiency. How do I get that back? You know,
Yeah,
like, stop people being lazy. Oh wait, I'm a millionaire. Who cares? Just keep going.
yeah. Oh yeah, I'm a millionaire. That was like Elon Musk. He tweeted, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I guess, like, oh, I'm the richest person in the world. Back to work."
Oh, oh, cool. Backward.
So cool.
Like, I get that. I get that mindset.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I like that you mentioned journaling before. It's a bit before now, but I have been journaling myself recently, and I found it so just refreshing. And for me, I guess I've never been sort of a routine person, so I'm going much more easy on myself. It's like, oh, I just
Good.
journal,
Yeah.
like, whenever, but mostly it happens
Yeah.
most days, and it just becomes more and more frequent. But like it's
Right.
something like whenever I feel overwhelmed or something, there's a trigger that's like, oh, maybe I could just go journal right now. Or like when I feel like I want to do some work but I'm procrastinating, like, oh, I can procrastinate by journaling, And journaling is
That's
so
true.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great because um I put my phone away. There's no electronics, no like music or anything. I'm very into the deep work sort of thing. If you don't know what deep work is, it's like uh, working with no distractions whatsoever. You don't go on email or Facebook or whatever, because the idea is that your brain has a limited amount of energy, and whatever you direct that energy towards is what reinforces your neurons. And so if you're trying to
Yeah.
work but you're on Facebook, like your brain is learning to work and then go on Facebook. Obviously, like
Right.
it's obvious.
Right.
But then
The habit changes.
oh yeah, absolutely. That's what you get. That's what your habits form into. And I find if I journal for, my rule is like, I have to journal for 3 pages, which is almost nothing. I mean, it's an A5 book, it's tiny. And then oftentimes I journal for like 45 minutes. And so I can write nothing, or I can write whatever I want, but I have to at least fill up 3 pages. And then the third thing I do is, if I'm writing something, like let's say I'm writing a script for a video, and then something's in my mind, like I'm worried about an argument that I'm having with a family member, or a disagreement or whatever, or I just, something comes up in my mind is like, oh, this is an issue. And usually I would just be like, oh, continue working, don't worry about this issue. But when I'm journaling, it's like, oh, this is the time that I write it out. So I just write down what the problem is. And so often I found that just writing it out somehow help, like I solve the problem. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if it activates a different part of my brain when I write it out, and it just, or it's like there on paper and then I can see it more clearly. But it's been so helpful for me.
Yeah. I think there's an aspect to, I don't know if this applies in the same way, but if I have the rule of threes for stuff that I have to do. If I have 3 things that I either have to get from the grocery store, or 3 things I have to do that day, if once it hits 3, I have to write it down so I can clear my mind of the pressure of having to do those things. Because if it hits 4 and I don't write it down, I will forget that 4th and 3rd one, most likely. But I found if I write those down, then I can't stop thinking about them. Like, I'm not like, I got to do this, I got to do this. It's just like, and I go to the store, I'm like, okay, I got to get those 4 things. And I remember what those 4 things are because I wrote them down. Because my brain no longer has to remember them, it doesn't forget them. So maybe writing down with journaling helps your brain to kind of dump the problem, put that note down, and that way it can start working on it without having to remember that there's a problem.
Makes sense, because I've heard this too. We kind of juggle. If you have to remember stuff, like if you have like 7 things you have to do today and you don't write them down, your brain is spending all this time being like, oh, remember you have to do this, remember this. And so that's all the energy. It's spending all this energy just juggling these things that we have to do, these priorities. But if you write it down, then it's like, oh, okay, it's written down, I can go back to it. Now let's work on the problem.
Exactly.
And then at nighttime as well is when you write, which is again very important for me, because I love to write things down at night, or to, I guess, set my intentions, because I think dreams and sleep are like one of the most important facets of my life. Like I'm very into analyzing my own dreams, but also just I'm very conscious about my sleep. I have to get enough sleep. And so, and good quality sleep. Like I think about it a lot. And so just before I go to bed, if I write down something I want to solve, or like my intentions or like my goals, and I just kind of not only just write down my goals, but I find that if I feel them, if I feel that I will get there, it's like, there's something about having faith, I guess, that I will get to these goals and it'll happen. And like, I don't know how, but it'll happen. And then if I go to sleep, I find my brain just naturally works on these problems, probably during sleep.
Yeah. And then you wake up with the solution or with peace or something. That happens to me a lot as well.
Go on. Here's a question I got from Tim Ferriss. And speaking of morning routines and journaling and stuff, he said, it's one of the questions that I love the most, and I've been trying to ask experts this. He says, what do people in your field commonly, what mistakes do people in your field commonly make, even the experts? So I guess like, I could either ask this in regards to CEOs or people in the drone industry, and maybe you want to answer both.
As far as the drone industry is concerned, I think one of the biggest mistakes is not innovating. And it's weird because working on swarm technology and talking to drone pilots. Now, drone pilots as a commercial job hasn't been around very long. And I talk about what I'm doing, and they're like, you're going to take jobs from the pilots. I'm like, what do you think you are doing here? You took the helicopter cameraman's job. You are in a career that's maybe going to be around a decade, if that, because it's going to be replaced by something else, by autonomy. And how can you be a drone pilot and not be looking into the future? But some people are just okay with being a drone pilot, which I'm fine with. But if you lose your job, then you of all people should not complain because you came from somewhere else. You took somebody else's job to get here. And I see a lot of companies in the drone industry have that same mindset where they're not looking to change the paradigm. They're not looking to innovate. They're looking to copy what everybody else is doing. And so a lot of the drones look the same. For instance, you can't really beat that 30-minute battery lifespan in a drone. So when a drone comes out and it can fly for 35 minutes or 40 minutes, that's a huge innovation. But one of the things we were working on was hydrogen power for drones, because we were trying to not figure out how to extend the life of the battery, but looking at the problem of energy storage from a different perspective, from a different element, from a different technology entirely. And one of the things that I talk with my team a lot is, do we even need propulsion? Do we need aerodynamics? Do we need energy? Like, can we look at this problem from an almost ridiculous perspective to try to find the answer?
Yeah, so do we need energy? How does that work?
Well, let's say, for just as an example, I'm not saying this is even possible, but right now we have propulsion which is based on aerodynamics. We have a prop that uses Bernoulli's principle to lift a wing by creating high pressure underneath the wing and low pressure above the wing. So that's basic aerodynamics. You can have anywhere from one prop. There's single prop drones, single prop airplanes, to, I don't know, 8 or 12, or however many you can get on an aircraft.
Sorry, what do you mean? You said
propeller.
Oh, okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah, propeller. But they're all using the same system. They're all using aerodynamics, right, to take one thing from point A to point B. And innovation is looking at a problem from a different perspective, and innovation always comes from the fringes of society, from the people who aren't the professionals. Airbnb didn't come from the hotels, and Uber didn't come from the taxis, and Tesla didn't come from Ford. And innovation never comes from tradition. It always comes from the fringes of society. So why are we doing things the same way that we've always done and trying to get a different result? Is it possible to, say, create a vacuum tube that launches something into space? I don't know. Let's just say it's possible to have a tube that's grounded in the earth that goes in through the atmosphere and is vacuum. It's a vacuum because there's no atmosphere inside it, and then you can launch stuff through the tube into space. Is that possible?
Cool. Wow.
I don't know if it's possible, but the point is, it's going around the idea of aerodynamics. It's going around the physics that we're working with currently. So the question that I want everybody to think about in my team is, how can we look at whatever problem we're trying to solve from a completely different angle that nobody's looked at before? For instance, I'm a professional magician, which is very strange. Considering the other stuff that I'm doing, it doesn't really fit, but it allows me a certain perspective on psychology and humanity and technology that I don't know how many, aerospace CEOs there are in the world, but there's not a lot of them. And that gives me an edge over other CEOs that are in this industry. So, that's just one idea, a vacuum tube into space. Is it possible? Who knows? Who cares? That mindset is what we need to actually break that 30-minute energy limit. Maybe there's a way we can slingshot stuff where we don't even need energy. Maybe there's a way, we can bend gravity or reverse gravity or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, divergent thinking is the way to. When psychologists measure how good people are at thinking of ideas like that, it's called divergent thinking. I have this this practice that I do when I'm coming up with ideas, and it's essentially making stupid lists of everything. So like, if I wanted to come up with a new technology for drones, I would write out a list from 1 to 20 and just fill it, and it would be like, painting them with solar panel paint. I don't know, I've heard of that solar panel paint stuff.
Yeah.
It would just be
right.
Like, it doesn't need to be good. And that's the point, actually. The point is that you just write whatever comes to your head, and then you'll probably come up with, a lot of times I find I come up with like just ideas that people have thought of before for the first 10. And then after 10, I'll start picking into like, I'll start figuring out weird stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a little squirrely
at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are the best, and most of them are complete garbage. But what it does is it trains your mind to break taboos. It teaches you it's okay to think weird thoughts. And when it's okay to think weird thoughts, you do it more often, and you come up with solutions that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Because I think a lot of us have this built-in inner critic, and the inner critic says, "Oh no, don't say that because that's stupid and you'll be embarrassed," or whatever it says,
Right.
And so it starts filtering things out before they even get on the page, and that's the opposite of what you want.
Right. No, you want those weird thoughts, and especially as an entrepreneur, because your job is to become a culture. You're trying to be the person.
How do you encourage employees to come to you with weird thoughts and ideas? Because they must be somewhat worried about what you think of them, or not necessarily you, but like if you have someone in a position of authority, you naturally kind of want them to think well of you. So how do you encourage people to come up with these weird ideas towards you?
A lot of that has to come with the people, comes with the people that I bring into my company, I look for people who are already like that. And I find them by being that way myself. Like when I talk to people, when I do interviews with people, like the tube into space. During an interview, that would be one of my interview questions. Like, is this possible? And I would make that one of the focuses of conversation, because I think it's a lot of fun to really bounce ideas off. Like, hey, what's the craziest thing you could possibly think of for getting something into space? Or what is the craziest technology you've ever thought up or tried to build? And when you get them on that train of thinking, especially if I tell them some of the crazy stuff that I've tried to do that either didn't work, or crazy ideas that I have that I'm hopefully going to do one day, they get excited because they realize that it's not a can you code. Yes, you can code. Are you an engineer? Yes, you're an engineer. I don't care about talking about the stuff that we already know you can do. It's a given that you're a good engineer. It is a given that you're good at your craft. I've seen your resume.
Yeah.
I want to know what makes you excited. And so my interviews usually are more of a conversation like this. And when they're excited about the same things I'm excited about, to the point where they forget they're in an interview, that's when I get the good stuff.
Yeah. Wow. That makes a lot of sense. It seems like I mean, the good companies, the companies on the edge, are kind of progressing past this traditional idea of what a company is. Like, you're respectful to your boss, and you show up in a suit, and you kind of just listen to your boss and do the work and work really hard and put in the extra hours, and then you get promoted. And like, we have to progress past that. Now we're these new companies, which is so exciting for me, are reaching towards, like, how do we change the world? How do we do it? How do we do the best thing we can for the environment? I was at the Singularity U conference. It's this Singularity University. They're an organization, and they have all these entrepreneurs who come, and I think their big thing is they do a meeting once a year. So I was there in 2019, and just before that, I had gone to a gold mining shareholders event. And the gold miners, it was like everyone was in a suit. Everyone looked exactly the same. They had the tie. And then there were just some sharks swimming in the water, like those business guys who just have those, like, that predatory eye. Like, they're just looking for this piece of meat. And nobody really talked to each other, and it was all just about money, money and mining, and gold's gonna go up and all this different stuff. And then I went to Singularity University, and people there, they were like, we invented this thing, and it's going to help the environment. We're going to save the fish. Like, there was this guy who had this, he was creating this artificial intelligence fish identifier. So it would go on the bottom of boats, and then it identified fish, and he'd already had it, like, up and running. And and it was just like, it was so much different. There was such a contrast between old business and new business. And I love how collectively we are evolving. It's amazing to see.
Yeah. I noticed that at the drone conferences too. I think one of the interesting things that I recognize in in a divergent thinking CEO is how they present themselves. And I go to these drone shows, and everybody has a drone. Everybody has their T-shirt with their logo. Everybody's got a hat on or something. Like, they all look the same. Everybody's the same. And I went to a couple of these shows, and the first couple times I went, I was bored because I'd meet people and they'd ask me what I do, and like, oh, I do commercial drone services. I'm a drone pilot. It's like, yeah, everybody here is. Or they're making drones, or they're something with drones. Is like, stop being in the middle of the crowd, like, we're all just trying to be the same in an industry where we're trying to not be the same, but we're trying to copy each other, so that it doesn't make sense. And I finally got tired of it, and I had this wallet. It had all my business cards in it, and a guy comes up to me, and when I first kind of just broke out of this idea, I'm like, I'm going to do something crazy. I want to do something way different that nobody else is doing. So we're getting these hors d'oeuvres, and charcuterie board, cheese and meats and stuff, and this guy comes up behind me. He's like, hey, so what do you do? I pull my wallet out, and I pull my business card out, and I look at it and light it on fire in my mind. I look at him, I shake it off, I put it in his hand, his jaw dropped. And I said, hey, if I can do this, what else can I do? And then I told him what I did.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you that is his go-to story at every conference he's ever going to. It's one of mine. It has to be one of his. Like he has to. So
he still has the burnt card. He has the
he has to.
card.
Absolutely. And from that moment on, I'm like, I'm never going to do the same thing that everybody else is doing because this is ridiculous. And I saw, there was one other guy that I saw that did that. And when you go down these aisles in the conference hall with, all these tables, everybody's got the same booth, and everybody's booth is bigger, brighter, whatever. There's this one guy, his name's Skip Fredericks, and he's a director and producer in Hollywood, and he worked on Sinbad back in the 90s. He's good friends with Sinbad. Are you familiar with Sinbad?
No, not really.
The TV show on Disney or something.
Yeah,
I didn't watch it either.
Not really.
Well, he had a booth, and he got rid of everything. There were no tables. There was no banners. He had a bunch of chairs. He had them all in a circle, and he had Sinbad there. And he had a little end table that had shrimp cocktail on it. And the chairs bumped into the hallway too, so you had to go around them to kind of get around the booth. And you're walking around like, who's this guy? What is he doing? Why are there so many people here laughing and having a good time? And you walk up, he's like, hey, you want some shrimp? All right, what's going on here? Oh, this is Sinbad. We're talking about Hollywood, blah blah blah. And so people just sat down and told stories.
Wow.
And every other booth, it's like, oh, what do you do? Oh, we make this. Here's the stats. And this is our drone. What do you do? Oh, we make drones. This is our stats. This is what we do. And it's boring rhetoric. But this guy, oh my goodness, like I want to be here all day.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a magician to think like that, but it helps, I think. But just being different and just not doing what everybody else is doing really makes you stand out.
Undercover Billionaire. It was it's this reality TV show. Oh, it's cool. So it's this reality TV show where they get a billionaire or someone who's close, I guess, to like, and then they give them $100 in a shitty truck, and they change their identity, and they put them in like a Midwest town with a pretty quiet town, and they say you have 90 days to make $1 million. And
wow.
Grant Cardone was on it. He's a crazy billionaire man, and he succeeded. Spoiler alert, I guess. But he would go up to people, and every time he's a salesman, so every time he would do a sales pitch, like he had no money, and he was trying to get all these people to go in on a giant apartment complex together and buy it together. So he would go and pitch, and he said every time I pitch to people, even if they say no, I want them to remember me. And so like this one guy has a gym. And he's like, all right, let's do like a pull-up competition. So he does a bunch of pull-ups, and then there's this like mechanical bull there in his gym. And so he was like, I'm gonna ride this thing. And it's not about selling. Like maybe you didn't sell that guy anything that day, but he worked hard, told fucking everyone about you. And now you have, now your reputation goes up. Now you're that cool guy who like anything can happen. That's really the art of sales. And it is just, it's magic in a lot of it is magic in a lot of
it is. And it's the same concept, like the whole goal is to build influence and attention, and that's what sales is. Like I'm a salesperson, but I'm not selling something, I'm selling myself. I'm selling my company. So best way to do that is to be different from everybody else. You don't have to be the best. It's a given that your drones are good. It's a given that we have engineers. Everybody does. So it's not about what you do. That's a given. It's about how you do it. And that's the difference.
Yeah. That's important. That's an important point. What would you recommend for a 20-year-old? They're like an 18-year-old just graduating high school and who wants to kind of maybe get into the drone industry. What would you recommend they do? What path should they take?
Well, engineering and software is always a good route to take because you're always going to have work, but yeah, that's a tough one. Because mine was a little bit different because I started as a man pilot. Then I got in pretty much at the top before it really took off. So if somebody wants to be in the drone industry, they need their Part 107 certificate first. And then, work on their stick skills, buy a small drone from Walmart or something like a Tello, and then work on those stick skills. And then start selling. One thing that I did when I first started early on was I would do a point of interest around the town. Of course, not flying over people, but with that one video, do like a 3-minute video with different shots. A circle around the town. I go this way across the town, showing the shop signs. I go this way back around the other side, and that would be like a dozen or so shops. I'd take that video into each shop and I'd show it to them and say, hey, I wanted to make sure that's okay if I post this on Facebook and Instagram. I know your shop is in here, and I just wanted to get permission. And that's a couple of things, because yes, they're going to say yes because that's free marketing for them. They're going to see that there's a really cool video that they've probably never seen from an angle they've never seen of their shop, and they're going to want more. And if they don't, well, now they know, and you can come back later. But I never asked them for the thing right there. I'm not like, hey, can I work with you guys? I'm like, hey, I have this little video. I want to make sure that I'm okay to put it on Facebook and Instagram. And usually they're like, yeah, tag me in everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you do that, you get like 12 companies that you just tagged, for social media.
They might share it
as
well.
And they share it.
Yeah.
So they share it. They all see that everybody else is a part of it. And that's social proof. So now you've got 12 companies looking at the other 11 companies. Like, oh, they're a part of it. Maybe they're doing this. We should get a video. And of course, I'm a drone pilot. So I walk in and they're like, drones, that's so cool. Like, how'd you do that? Because everybody's interested in drones, even if they don't know it. And then I just tell them, that having a video, a little marketing video, ups your sales by 20%. Because that's what it does. So
you've come
that'd be the easiest and best way to get in.
Yeah. So you've come in and you've offered, essentially come in and said, hey, I've done this cool thing that's going to help you out. Here it is. Like, instead of kind of asking for a handout, not a handout, but asking for a favor, asking to do business with someone, you've just gone to them and been like, hey, I helped you. Here's how I helped you. Yeah, that's a great idea. Because I guess it's like that concept of ask what you can do for someone else first. Like millionaires often are just doing services for other people, or they're selling something that a person wants.
Right.
Somebody's giving them the money.
Right. Everybody, what you're selling, like, people want it, or you shouldn't be selling it. People need it, or you shouldn't be selling it. If you're not, if you're not excited about what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing it. And that's something that's easy to get excited about because it's super cool. And when you're excited about it, it's contagious. You walk into a store, like, you get a little bit nervous, but you get, everybody's nervous to talk to strangers in some sense, but you're also backed by the concept, or by the idea that you really like what you're doing and it's exciting, and you walk in, you're like, hey, so I did this thing, and they're like, oh, that's so cool. And then you get excited because now they're excited. Oh yeah, it is. Let's talk about how cool this is. And you just meet you meet people. So you walk into any town and do that. Like, even if you're not selling drones or doing anything with drones. Like if you do that, if you get a drone and you do that, you're going to know every single person in the town within like a weekend.
Yeah. True.
You just walk into all of the shops in like an hour and you're just like, oh my God, that's so cool. And they will always remember you.
Yeah. And that's and I guess the real value here is extrapolating from that. So even if you're not into drones at all, it's like, oh, how could you, it's more that the valuable key here is the concept of like going out and just providing a service for people and yeah, of course,
Yeah.
and meeting people, like getting to know everyone, the networking.
Exactly.
Do you get gut feelings? I wonder, do you find yourself listening? Do you listen to your intuition in every way? Does it help you make decisions?
Absolutely. I find when I don't listen to my intuition, everything goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Same.
my intuition is probably the most important thing that I have honed from years of social dynamics and networking and understanding people and a lot of failure. This is my 5th company.
Wow.
Started 4 before, and I've learned things about business that I've seen multi-million dollar companies do horribly wrong. And like I learned that like 2 years ago. Like how are you guys so big and haven't learned that yet? So yeah, I think intuition is it really is one of the biggest things I rely on.
What is your process for connecting with your intuition?
I wouldn't know exactly what I think. Like before, when I talk about that tunnel, knowing what my objective is, my goal is, kind of helps me be able to weed out stuff that doesn't fit that goal or objective. I think it's a lot of dealing with people. It's whether I am able to sleep well that night after I've talked to somebody. Like sleep is a big part of it. The way I feel about somebody, like if I meet somebody and I'm just like, there's something off with them, like later on, I may not know why, but I can usually work out what it was I was picking up on. Because people can't lie. If they say something with their mouth that isn't true, then their hands will give it away, or their facial features will give it away, or their stance will give it away. And what I've learned from magic and pickup arts and social dynamics and stuff like that gives me these words that I can apply to certain behaviors that I notice. Well, and also being in the Marines and being hyper observant, I pick up on things before I even know what I'm picking up on, and then later I can work it out because I'm like, there's something not right here. There's something that didn't make sense, and I have to spend time figuring that out.
Yeah.
Usually. Usually 5 and overnight, like I won't be able to sleep well or something, or I'll wake up early and I'll just have the idea in my head right then and there. Like overnight, it just works itself out. I'm like, oh yeah, duh. Like they were lying because of this or because of that, and it just put itself together.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sleep. Yeah, sleep. I've never factored it in like that. But I have made big decisions based on someone's face, like just something their face wasn't right, or something they said that just felt off to me. I think a big part of becoming an adult was realizing that I needed to trust my instincts even if I didn't know why I was trusting them. So like, you know, I think we have this natural sort of inclination to, or a lot of people do, to be like polite or to just go with the flow or whatever it is. And so oftentimes people will have this intuition like, oh, this isn't right, I need to leave this situation, I shouldn't do business with this person. But then it's like, well, don't be rude, you know, like,
Right.
so we're putting
Or
polite.
you want to listen to them because whatever reason,
Yeah, they're offering you an opportunity and you want it to be real, of course.
yeah.
It's huge. It's a big deal.
And those red flags, listening to red flags. Oh my gosh. How long did it take to learn when a red flag goes off? It's the concept I get in trouble with a lot is being too harsh on people when I find out they've done something. But the reason I'm harsh on people, like if they lie to me and I fire them or something, it's just like, it's not the first time they've lied to you. It's the first time they got caught. And you don't know how much damage they've done up until that point. And however long you keep them around multiplies the amount of damage they can do once they've found out that they've been caught. So when you find out that somebody's doing something, they're lying to you or they're cheating or whatever, you immediately cut off the cause of the problem so that you can start repairing the damage, even if it looks mean, feels mean.
Oh, I have exactly the same policy. Yeah. Oh, go on.
What?
I have exactly the same policy. Yeah. Out.
Yeah. Yeah, out. Like there's no reason to stick around. There's more people on the planet. There's plenty of fish in the sea, as they say. So why waste your time when you know that there's something wrong? And red flags, like the simplest stuff, like the last contract I had was a LiDAR contract in a helicopter. I was flying in a helicopter in San Diego with a LiDAR camera doing distribution inspection. And I have my rules, right? My minimums that I'm not going to break away from. Like my housing has to be taken care of. My vehicle needs to be taken care of. Like I have to have these things, or I'm not even going to consider the opportunity. And all of the things were in place for this contract, except once I got out there, the per diem, where usually I get about 200 per diem per day to cover food and hotels. The per diem, because I was a contractor, was not 200 a day. It was reimbursement for whatever I spent. So that's an automatic red flag. One, because now I have to wait like 2 weeks to get reimbursed for the money I'm about to put up front. If I'm going to put money up front for a customer, what stops them from backing out of the contract and not giving me my money back? So those things have to be taken care of up front because I've been through that before. And when they change the contract in the middle after you've already accepted it and you've already been out there, that is a red flag because it's precedent for how they run their operations. Because that's not the first thing they're going to change up. Well, it might be the first, but it's not going to be the last.
Not the last, yeah.
And that one thing gave me all of the insight that I needed for the entire contract. It was so small, it was so simple, but it was such a huge red flag because it showed me their entire operations and their logistics and their finances and their like everything after that just snowballed, and I was there maybe a week. They paid for everything, they covered everything, but there were so many other things that happened. They're like, yeah, I saw this. I wasn't surprised by it because I saw it right from that one instance that it was going to go that way.
So important. Yeah, lying is huge for me. I'm a massive proponent of like, I tell my friends this too. Like if I become friends with someone, I'm like I have to actually kind of almost warn them, but it's like I take lying very seriously. Like if you lie to me, like oftentimes it's like a downgrade of friendship. Like you go from good friend to just friend, or because I'm going to die one day, and I do not want to spend my time trying to sort out what's real and what's not. Because as soon as you lie to me, I'm like, what else have you lied about? You're telling me you're going to the store. Are you really going to the store? Like, I don't want to deal with that. It's just so much easier. And I have a friend who I just kind of made friends with her recently, and she said something and afterwards she said something very, very honest that was fine, but it could have been taken very personally. And she said afterwards, like, I was prepared to not to lose some friends when I said that, and I was like, that's exactly what I want in a person.
Those are the people I like in my life.
Yeah, that's because
Yeah.
you don't want to be surrounded by yes men who just do whatever you say,
Right.
and, you know, agree with you.
No,
Like,
tell me when I'm wrong. I can't afford to be right all the time.
absolutely, and I'm not. Of course, I'm not. I need to
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um.
Else you supposed to go.
So I want to wrap up fairly soon, but I just remembered that Aerie, you said had you guys were trying to go, was it zero carbon emissions? Something very environmental.
Yeah, so we're doing, well, batteries themselves are environmentally friendly, relatively. They don't have
Sorry,
any emissions, but
you just went
hydrogen.
hazy there. The batteries are hydrogen?
No, so hydrogen fuel is something that we're looking at for long-term, travel for the density issue of batteries. If you have a drone that's this big and it has a battery, it's about 30-minute flight time. If it's this big, it has the same flight time. But with hydrogen, the bigger you go, the denser it is, the bigger your tank, the longer you can go. So a drone that's, I don't know, about the size of this this table that I'm in front of would fly. We have one that flies for 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's other complications that come with that, but I think as the hydrogen economy grows, and it's pretty slow right now, but it's picking up, and once it picks up and reaches that tipping point, we're going to have a lot more options with hydrogen as the fuel economy for the entire future economy.
And is it more environmentally viable to create hydrogen batteries?
I think the hydrogen production, once it reaches that that adoption phase, is more environmentally friendly because it's water. It's the largest natural resource we have, and there's no byproduct to it. So once we can create enough of it at a scale where we're not losing so much money and power to create it, then it becomes the best fuel option for every vehicle that we have, even beyond batteries.
I mean, lithium, I talked to someone else in my podcast, Tim Jostling, and he's just a genius. But he was talking about how essentially we're at this we're at this kind of impasse with solar panels, because solar panels are all well and good, but actually the batteries are essentially made by smashing the Amazon rainforest, just cutting down all the trees, mining the lithium with slaves, bringing it back, like building train tracks through these beautiful forests, and then the batteries themselves, so that takes up so much carbon. Like something like a Tesla car, if it's all renewable energy, I think takes 10 years to be a better in terms of carbon emissions than a regular gas car. So solar panels and lithium ion batteries just aren't, we need a different solution. We need a different battery.
Right.
That is the future. So I'm glad.
I believe hydrogen has that potential. It's got a long way to go, but because it's expensive to create, but it's basically turning water into electricity.
And it also, the Hindenburg is the famous hydrogen powered disaster when it crashed.
Hindenburg, I believe, was helium.
No, I don't think it was helium.
Was it hydrogen?
I think it was hydrogen. I don't think.
Okay, either way, yeah, I mean, if it's in a balloon, then yeah, it's possible to create a disaster with it, and it's also possible to create a disaster with oil. Look at BP.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's oil spills that kill marine life.
Yeah,
we're not safe.
Yeah.
And I guess
So,
I'm just wondering how, like, on impact, I mean, is there a danger on impact with a drone of it blowing up?
there is, but the danger is so low because of the rating system for the canisters that hold the hydrogen. It has to be 10 to 1, so 10 times stronger than the pressure of the gas inside it, or the liquid hydrogen or whatever. It has to be, the canister can take a bullet and not explode.
Oh, that's incredible.
Versus a fuel tank underneath your car, like this far away from, 60-mile-per-hour pavement, that, if you get a scratch or a rock or something, you're creating this whole fire that goes down, and the fire goes down. So the oil goes out. And if you're in California or something, that's, every car is a disaster waiting to happen. But a hydrogen tank, if you have an explosion, it goes up because hydrogen's lighter than air. So
okay.
If you have an explosion, then that means you'd have to have something so devastating that it can beat 10 times the strength of the pressure inside the canister itself.
Yeah, that's one of those situations which we could foresee happening and might scare us, but in reality, there are so many precautions taken that
it's safer than what we currently have. Which a lot of the fear of the future is worse than the reality of it itself.
Right. I think I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Thanks for having me. Me too. Great conversation.
And I wish you all the best, and any potential investors out there, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. You can look up Aerie Collective. That's AERIE, like the eagle's nest. Aeriecollective.com. And we're actually putting on a tech magic show. Is our next evolution of, speaking of looking at things in a different direction. We're putting on a tech magic show to demonstrate the potential of technology and where we're going with NFTs, blockchain, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies in general, swarm drones, swarm light shows, and of course using magic as the tie-in between the education behind the technology itself. So we want people to get excited about technology in the future of the world, not disillusioned with how hard things are, how people are taking advantage of your security with Facebook and Google and stuff like that.
That's the perfect intersection of your personalities, tech and magic coming together. Like no one was doing that.
About time. Well, it took long enough to get there. But nobody else is doing it, so we have no competition.
Is there somewhere we can find that? The Tech Magic Show? Where can we look out for it?
In Raleigh, North Carolina, we're working on our first one. We would love to get funding to put it together, and venues would help a lot. But we're looking at doing our next one mid-December.
Great. I'm excited. Is it going to be on YouTube or anything, or is it just going to be like a rolling show?
It'll be a rolling show. We're going to be doing it in person, but we'll probably have it on. We'll probably have it on YouTube, Instagram, and then of course on the website once we get that marketing material set up.
I could see Netflix filming, like buying something like that. That sounds cool. Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Be exciting.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll see you later.
Thank you. Sounds good. Appreciate it.